Everybody is pretending.
And that's why you call the book Faking Normal.
Right. Because there's a lot of pressure to seem like you are doing well.
Elizabeth White is not doing terribly well. As she painfully chronicles in the book she's just self-published, 55, unemployed, and faking normal. White's been on the edge of the financial cliff for years, even though you'd never know it from how she looks, or the Washington, D.C. townhouse she bought years ago, one she couldn't even dream of renting today.
But you haven't been in a situation where you literally couldn't afford whatever it is, the condo fee or...
Oh, absolutely, I have. I'm right now have to park outside because I'm in arrears on the condo fee. Right now.
And she's refinanced to the hilt, taking in a boarder.
Well, you haven't used food stamps.
But I have. I've had to.
It's been quite a comeuppance for someone with her background.
I have a bachelor's from Oberlin. I have a master's in international studies from Johns Hopkins. I have a Harvard MBA. I worked at the World Bank, came in through a program where they recruited 5,000 people. They took 2 Americans out of that 25. I was one of the Americans.
But ultimately, White decided to leave the bank to start her own business.
I had a chain of stores, of decorative home stores.
Really?
Yes. I sold some of the things you see here, African-inspired products. I realized that there was an African-American market that wanted things in their home that reflected heritage and culture. If you wanted to give your little girl Black Ragnando, you couldn't easily find it. So I just curated that from all over. So I then bet the ranch that I could get this going. So I took a lot of my, not all of it, but I took a big chunk of my World Bank money to sort of fund this.
Retirement savings.
Savings. But it wasn't going, it was doing well, but I couldn't see my vendors of artists and producers were not going to be able to blow this out into a national chain. We're already struggling with volume.
Did you sell your stores?
No, closed it in the end. Just didn't work.
But steady consulting work allowed White to maintain an upper middle class lifestyle for a while, until the crash of '08.
Within 6 months, I went from, you know, probably close to
$200,000 a year.
Right, to zero.
And after that, the jobs of the past were nowhere to be found.
This is, to me, where the age discrimination piece happened. I find it much harder at this phase of life to get hired than I did earlier.
But you look so young, and I'm not just saying that to, you know, flatter you or something. I mean, you surely can pass now. You're 62 or something? 63. And you could pass for your 50s easily, mid-50s, early 50s, right?
Early 50s is not considered young in the workplace.
No, it's not, as we learned in an interview with economist Teresa Ghilarducci, citing a study by the New York Federal Reserve.
From 45 to 55, wages decreased by 9%. From 55 to 65, another 9%. So this age earnings profile where you kind of peak and then it flattens out and falls, that age of peaking is a lot younger than we ever thought.
And that corresponds to age discrimination as measured in economic experiments by the likes of Joanna Leahy, who sent fake resumes to employers. The red dots show where on the resumes HR managers looked and for how long.
And when does age discrimination start?
Immediately. It starts at age 35.
Really?
Yeah, it's a pretty steady process.
And it's women more than men?
It's definitely women more than men.
No wonder career coaches tell you to wipe the dates off your CV. But, says White,
when they then ask you to fill out the application, that's all algorithm driven, you cannot leave off when you graduated from college. And once you put that date in there,
then it's
they
clear.
know. Now, as you get older, your network also is not what it used to be.
Because they're losing their jobs.
They're losing their jobs. They are retiring. They're not hearing about things. They're winding down. People have died.
So White has been scraping by with scattered freelance gigs.
So it's sort of bits and pieces that allow me to cobble together income.
But nowhere near the income of the past.
Oh, no.
Not
No.
even close.
No. I mean, again, I have years of, under 30,000.
Help has come from unexpected sources, like neighborhood free spirit Elijah, a clothing minimalist.
I was getting on the far side of where my mortgage company was getting like serious with me.
Because you were behind in your payment.
Behind. He just said, Lizzie, I'll do it. I can do it.
But I'll do it meaning I'll make up the
Yes,
difference.
I will do it.
He'll pay your
it.
mortgage.
Right. So this is my Elijah. This is my Elijah. Yeah.
I'm people's Elijah.
The Vietnam vet gets about $900 in monthly benefits, saves almost half.
I'm not a things person. How much money you think I'm spending on my attire? Okay.
As he says, I have a few friends like you who are in the stuff world, is what he calls. You're always getting into some kind of mishap.
Grateful to get by, with a little help from her friends, White was also embarrassed.
You're the loser. How can you have this kind of background and be landing here?
There must be something wrong with
It
you.
has to be. And then you read things like, oh, it's the latte factor. It's all that bottled water you were drinking. It's
The latte factor, you were spending too much
right,
money
and-
at
right,
Starbucks.
Right.
But you could have saved more, couldn't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So are you...
I could have not started a business. I stayed at the World Bank, not taking that, risk.
But she did. Her reward? Financial fragility. Something she now shares with a surprisingly large portion of the former so-called middle class.
I would say I feel optimistic generally.
63-year-old Elizabeth White has been severely underemployed for 3 years.
I had $750 left to kind of make it through the end of the month. I've done it on less.
Deborah Burkholder hasn't had a full-time job since 2009.
Don't have enough to cover January bills if nothing changes. It's hard to predict what will happen the next month. And, in calculating how many times do I have to go through this until I'm buried.
There is a low-level stress that that is wearing.
One way to manage, airing out anxiety in what White calls a resilience circle of financially fragile friends, all formerly middle class, all well past 50, and all too common these days, says economist Teresa Ghilarducci.
We're finding that very well-educated people, people who have done everything right, are behind, really behind. And they are hoping they can stay in the labor market. But a word that's used in other countries that isn't used here is very apt here. The word is superannuated. That you have kept yourself going, but the labor market employers don't put the same value on your experience and your know-how and your wisdom as you might have hoped or they've done in the past.
And the experience can be a killer. A Yale study found that just one layoff in a lifetime increases the odds of a stroke or heart attack by 40%. But what if you're just worried about maintaining your standard of living?
My research shows that uncertainty about your income at older ages causes more depression, causes more anxiety, which could lead to more chronic heart failure, heart disease, does actually mean shorter lifespans.
Thus, the resilience circle, as a way of reasserting some measure of control.
There's a lot around us to make us feel bad. There's a lot around us that would say, oh, this is all your fault, you landed here, you're a loser, you landed here. So people can start self-medicating. They can start, just a lot of sort of negative places that it can take them.
If we take everything as personal, that very thinking is going to prevent us from taking effective action, from being creative.
Coming and having these conversations always anchors me in a different way so that I can tell myself a better story.
Though, of course, emotional support doesn't pay the bills.
I think a lot of people who've gotten pushed out of the workforce and are in the late 50s, early 60s are never going to have a traditional 9-to-5 W-2 job. We're not going to be able to have the lives that we thought that we were going to have. And there's some mourning of that.
Every Sunday afternoon, Elizabeth White heads to Malcolm X Park near her home in Washington, D.C. for a therapy session with a drum circle.
I can work it all out in that park and just dance. And it's festive and it's free.
We first met White in January after she just self-published a book, 55 Unemployed and Faking Normal.
Everybody is pretending.
And that's why you call the book Faking Normal.
Right. Because there's a lot of pressure to seem like you are doing well.
In fact, White had long been on the edge of the financial cliff. Despite a career at the World Bank, graduate degrees from Johns Hopkins and Harvard, she'd been unable to find steady work since the Great Recession. She'd once made 6 figures, but she now struggled to pay the mortgage on her townhouse.
But you haven't been in a situation where you literally couldn't afford whatever it is, the condo fee or...
Oh, absolutely, I have. I'm right now have to park outside because I'm in arrears on the condo fee. Right now.
And she'd refinanced to the hilt, taken in a boarder.
Well, you haven't used food stamps.
But I have. I've had to.
White worked scattered freelance gigs, but still had to borrow money from friends like neighborhood free spirit Elijah, a clothing minimalist.
I'm not a things person. How much money do you think I'm spending on my attire? Okay.
White is far from alone, as we learned at what she calls her resilience circle. Deborah Burkholder hadn't had a full-time job since 2009.
Don't have enough to cover January bills if nothing changes. It's hard to predict what will happen the next month. And, in calculating how many times do I have to go through this until I'm buried.
9 months later, the economy has improved with the weather. Although overall unemployment ticked up in August, it's at a low 4.4%. Still, more than 30% of job seekers over age 55 have been out of work for more than half a year. No wonder White's story has resonated in the months since her appearance on the NewsHour.
Spoke to groups in San Francisco, in Boston, in Memphis.
So you've become the voice of Faking Normal.
I'm becoming a voice for sure. I'm getting a lot of thank you for just bringing this topic up. I thought I was by myself. I get a few emails every day of stories of what's happening to people.
What is happening to people?
People are worried. Someone wrote me that they had to move out of their housing into subsidized housing. They never expected to land there. They had to give up their car. They're doing jobs that they never expected that they would have to do, dog walking and all of this.
Have you become more reassured about yourself as you encounter more and more people who have had the same experience?
I have become more convinced that I'm doing the work I'm supposed to do. I did a great consultancy since I saw you with Senior Service America, helping low-income older adults find work.
As part of her work with the group, White went to speak to ex-factory workers in rural Martin, Tennessee.
The factory had been, China, Mexico, outsourced somewhere. And then they were left at 50, 55, 57, maybe with a high school education, maybe a little bit of college. And they were jettisoned out of the workforce. And I got a standing ovation there. And then the Great Recession hit. 2 weeks before that, I was at an event at MIT. These were former high earners, long-term unemployed, and hearing the two conversations close together, they were almost exactly the same. It didn't matter whether you gave up salmon or catfish. It was the same conversation.
So were you surprised when you went to Martin, Tennessee and saw that factory workers were feeling and talking exactly the same way?
I have a very urban appearance.
Yes, you
yeah. You know, I got the hair and diamond nose bow. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't know kind of how this was. And none of it mattered. None of it mattered.
Because they had been faking normal too.
If faking normal means that you're not sharing with people candidly what's happening to you and what you're afraid of, yes. I had a situation here where I spoke and a woman jumped up, screaming and crying, running out of the room. And what she said is, "You are telling my story. How did you get into my head? How did you know this was happening to me? How did you convey the pain that I'm feeling about where I've landed?" I've had men cry, and absolutely. There was a man, he told me I'd been living in his car. I'd been living in his car. And that was at MIT. He'd been living in his car.
This guy was a former high earner,
Yes.
living in his car.
Living in his car.
So where are you financially now?
I would say a bit better. Okay. So it's still feast or famine. It is not the Cinderella story, bow on the end. I know that's what people want. I don't think it's going to be that for really any of us. Where I am is I can see a pathway forward. I like what I'm doing a lot. I feel like I am contributing. People are getting that affirmation. I feel like I am creating a really interesting casserole of work.
And you're making money by doing speaking engagements? I mean, consulting on this very issue?
So it's a combination. I sell some books.
Right.
Okay. I do some speaking. I teach. And then I have one remaining consultancy from before. The cobbling that together is enough to kind of keep me, I'm okay.
How you doing? I'm well. How you doing?
But according to White's friend Elijah, whom we bumped into at the park, she has found her purpose.
At first, it was like, I need help, you know. But then now she's got enough of a footing, and she see how there are millions like her. She said, "Oh, I got a purpose. I got to do this."
Life hasn't turned out quite as White expected. She scrimps, doesn't save. But she's drummed up work that matters. You know that line was coming, right? Living a rich life on a modest income. And not faking normal anymore.